Hey everybody, it is Romania Black. Holy cow. So last set of episodes of Ace of the Diamond, the 13 episode match between Sato and Inashiro finally ended. It was epic. I have thought about it since I've watched that set of episodes, and it's probably the best sports anime game I've seen from start to finish. Like there's been sports anime games that maybe had higher highs perhaps, but not the consistency for as long as the game went. Like at no point from the first episode to the 13th episode did I feel like it was repetitive, that it wasn't fresh, that it wasn't intense, that the emotions weren't there. There may have been other sports anime matches that I've seen have more epic moments, but again, we're still in season 1, so we're not even to like the other seasons. But consistently, to have the emotional highs that it did and keep that maintained throughout the entire game, and to have such a devastating conclusion, I don't think I've watched a sports anime game like that. And I don't know if I will. Some of you commented, you're like, this is like one of the end-all be-all sports anime games. I see it. It's there. It's so good. But I really, really enjoyed it, even though it crushed my soul by the end of it. But now I'm more worried about, I always get worried in sports anime when there's that post part, you know? It's happened in Haikyuu. It's happened, well, it kind of happened in Slam Dunk to an extent. Not too much, but it's happened in Haikyuu. It's happened, it either goes one of two ways. Either they win and it's like a great aftermath, like some series, or you have like the post-loss. I think of Haikyuu at the end of season 1, similar to this, where you lose against the team and it's like, although this is way more epic. But you lose, and then there's that period of rebuilding. That's always my biggest dread going into a sports series, is that rebuilding period, because they've just lost their third years. Their third years are still going to be around for another 6 months, but they're not going to be able to play with them. They've lost them. So Yuki, Jun, Rio, Masako, they're all gone. Tamba, they're gone. They don't have them anymore. So that's like your best batters and and your ace are gone now. And like Miyuki said at the end of the episode, we're kind of in a bad place because Sato just lost their most experienced players and they really relied upon them. So whereas teams like Yakushi, they have, Raichi and Sonata. Sonata's still their ace pitcher, so they still have him. And then teams like Inashiro have a whole bunch of players. Like their main cannons are just second years. So I said at the end of the last set of episodes that I thought Miyuki would become captain. But I want to point out Sarah, one of the YouTube commenters, brought up a really cool point. And that's that I haven't gave Kuramochi enough credit, because Kuramochi's one of our second years, and Kuramochi, she was likening him a lot to Yuki, and Kuramochi, it doesn't have the same personality as Yuki. I would argue Miyuki's personality is more similar to Yuki. They're more stoic characters. But Kuramochi has that communication skill. Kuramochi has that camaraderie with the entire team and that communication, and is able to be like, have that optimism, and is a good player. He was an MVP in that one episode when he caught that catch that Rio missed. And so Kuramochi is a good player and is kind of an all-around balanced player too. And I think that's why I've kind of overlooked Kuramochi throughout most of the last set of episodes, because Miyuki is flashy. Miyuki has had the flashy catcher moves, like the crazy catch off that when he like bounced off the backboard there behind the plate and caught that ball. Miyuki's had some really flashy, amazing plays. But Miyuki's biggest detriment is that he doesn't know how to communicate with his pitchers. He can communicate with them, but not to the fullest extent. He doesn't have a battery like Mei and Harada did. He doesn't have that relationship with his pitchers that other teams have, and that's Miyuki's biggest detriment. And someone else pointed out, and I thought this was really cool, that Miyuki's grown up around adults his whole life, and so Miyuki is used to being a more mature person, but he talks to people kind of like adults talk to kids, right? Because that's what he's been used to. He's not really had interactions with people his own age to kind of have that socialization up until he got into junior high and high school. Whereas Sawamura has constantly been surrounded by people and friends and had that, and this interaction and communication comes easy to Sawamura, whereas to Miyuki it's a lot harder. And so it's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that with Kuramochi. Part of my gut still is like, I want Miyuki to become captain because it'll be a challenge for Miyuki. Miyuki's going to have to, because it's going to make Miyuki a better player, I think, if he becomes captain. I think Miyuki becoming captain will force him to become, it's kind of the opposite thing with the ace. You know, we talked on Patreon and YouTube about Furuya becoming possibly the ace, and Furuya seems to want to become the ace. And it's kind of the opposite scenario. Sawamura, I think, even though I want Sawamura to be the ace so badly because he's our main character and he's our sunshine boy, it might be to Sawamura's benefit to not immediately become the ace, because that way it will give Sawamura encouragement to keep working and to better himself to get to that point. Whereas Furuya has the resolve and drive right now, and to keep that resolve and drive going, it might make sense to make Furuya the ace. Whereas on the opposite end of the spectrum, it might make sense for Miyuki to become captain, because that's going to force Miyuki. Miyuki is driven and he wants the team to do well. And so he's like, okay, if my team is relying upon me as captain, I'm going to need to step up my game and communicate more with my pitchers and become a better communicator and work with them, bond with them more. I'm going to have to do that if I'm captain. So it's kind of the opposite scenario. Like Sawamura, I don't think needs to be the ace right now because he's got to work on himself. Whereas Miyuki needs to become captain so that it forces him to take a stand and do something to make himself a better player. I think Kuramochi's already there. Like, he's got all the pieces and he's a good balanced player. But I think Miyuki has the potential. He's just not there yet. So I don't know. And you could argue that Sawamura needs to become the ace because that will drive him and make him, you know, think more of his team and have those qualities too. You can argue it either way. I think you can argue it. I just thank you, Sarah, for bringing that up about Kuramochi, because I felt like I kind of gave him the shaft at the end of the last episode, and you pointed out something really neat about his character. But yeah, those episodes, yeah, they crushed me. That was a really hard loss. It was hard to watch. It was hard to see our characters suffer. And the problem is the suffering's not over. This episode's called Restart. To start us out, we're doing episodes 64, 65, and 66. The rest of season 1, we're going to have 3 episode increments, because I think that's going to make it all end out. And then I know there's some OVAs at the end of season 1, so I definitely want to watch the OVAs. We might have instead of a Titan week, we'll have an Ace of the Diamond week where I watch the OVAs in between. We'll try to plan that out. It'll be probably around December when that happens. But yeah, I'm both excited to see what our team does, because we've got 2 more seasons, so they got to pick up the pieces somewhere. They got to get better, and I want to see how they do that. But I'm also really nervous because there's going to be that, it's always darkest before the dawn, right? There's going to be that point where everybody's struggling, and I hate that moment in sports anime where they're all like down and out, and then and it seems like Furuya might be the driving force. Maybe him becoming the ace will be like the boost they all need. I don't see it from Kawakami. I know I give Kawakami a hard time, and I feel for the boy, but I just don't feel like he needs to step up as a 3rd year, but I just don't know if he's got enough in him to be the ace. I don't think so. I think it's going to be Sawamura or Furuya. But this next scrimmage, without their players, their 3rd years, the other 1st and 2nd years that have sat the bench, they're going to need to pick up the pace too and step up their game. So that's going to be really interesting as well, because I hadn't even thought of that. The guys that have been sitting out in the stands, they're going to have to start coming in too, because we'll need the players. So, and then next year, we're going to have all new 1st years. So that's going to be bizarre. That's going to be weird. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but I'm really excited, y'all. So yeah, episodes 64, 65, and 66, I'm pretty excited to get into that. So let's do this, shall we? I've talked way too long for this intro, but we're going to start episode 64 here. I've been told not to watch the ED until episode 71 is over. I was told that that's a spoiler, that the ED has spoilers for the episodes leading up to 71. So I'm not going to watch the ED for these episodes. I'm going to wait till after episode 71 is over, and then I'm going to watch the ED, because I don't want to be spoiled. So with that being said, we're going to start that here, episode 64, here in 3, 2, 1, let's go. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So again, this show, I keep thinking, I'm like, oh man, this show can't get better and better. And it does. With every set of episodes, it gets better and better. I shouldn't be surprised at this point. But coming off the heels of that, I was really worried for this set of episodes in particular, because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. And so much happened. Oh my God. There's so much being set up for the next season already, and I'm nervous, and there's parts that I'm like, what a set of episodes. Holy cow, there's so much to talk about. I took giant pages of notes for this, because I had forgot, when I started watching the episodes, I had forgot that I needed to take notes, and then I was like, oh yeah, I need to take notes, because these reactions doing 3 episodes is so long that I need to take notes as I watch, otherwise I'll forget plot points. But the scope that this set of episodes went through was just crazy. So we need to talk about it episode for episode. First with episode 64, Restart. Kataoka! No! I'm excited to have, what is his name? To have Ochiai? I'm excited to have Ochiai, old Ochi on there. I'm excited to have him as the assistant coach, because he seems completely different than Kataoka. 100% different. On the surface, he seems so nonchalant and shy and quiet, but I have a feeling he's like a demon senpai. I have a feeling he's going to be like a demon coach when it comes down to it. And he's been to nationals before. They established he coached for 20 years, and he's taken teams before to nationals. So he clearly knows what he's talking about, but I'm so curious to see how he's going to, because they established that normally Sato has alumni come in to coach. And this is the first outsider they've had come in. So I'm curious what perspective he will bring with the teams that he's taken to nationals that he's going to go through. So I'm very curious. It seems like right now he's just soaking everything in and seeing how Sato does things. And then he's going to be like, okay, let's change it up a bit. So it's so interesting. We'll talk about that when we get to that episode, to the last episode. But with episode 64, man, so establishing Zono. I like Zono's character a lot, and I like that we got Haruichi's eye, and he wasn't even up to bat. But he comes to Haruichi with the idea that, yeah, it sucks we lost. He's like, I felt that. He's like, you weren't in the bleachers, you don't know, but we all felt the same loss. He's like, but you also don't know how it feels to sit the bench as a first year and a second year. Because he's a second year, I'm pretty sure, Zono is. Yeah, he's a second year. And so he's like, you don't know how it feels to watch a younger underclassman get to play, and you have to sit out the game and not be able, kind of like what Furuya was saying at the end of last episode. Furuya was like, I hate that feeling of not being able to do anything, and I don't want that to happen anymore. So it's kind of that same deal, right? And he can relate. Zono's like, I don't want that to happen. He's like, so, you can choose not to play and practice and kind of sulk there. He's like, it's great you have that privilege, but we're going to be working to take our spots on the roster. He's like, I've been waiting for the third years to retire so I can prove myself. And it's like, and that's a big mentality a lot of these players have, and you can like it or not like it, but Zono brings up a really good point. He's like, I'm not going to sit here and not fight for that spot now that it's open. And so many of them are. I like the idea that we've got first and second years that we've seen in face only, that now we're going to get to see more develop. That's really cool. And I like Zono's character. He's kind of like, I always forget his name, but the third year that's like sniffs, he goes, whew, like sniffs his nose and everything. He kind of reminds me of him a lot. And I feel bad that I forget his name. But, so Kuramochi and Miyuki, a lot of you ship Kuramochi and Miyuki, which is interesting. But they're such an interesting combination, that them vying for the spot of captain. But I like that they weren't the only ones brought up. Shirasu was brought up, Zono was brought up, Kawakami was brought up. I like that idea, the second years and first years fighting for spots on the roster. I hadn't even thought of Shirasu, but Zono makes a good point. Zono's like, the attitude of the captain needs to be somebody that can raise the morale of the whole team. And I can't believe that Kataoka bringing in Kuramochi and Zono to talk about Miyuki becoming captain. We'll get to that. I'm going through my notes in order. I love that the one blonde guy, I can never remember his name, the blonde first year, calls Sawamura Sawamoron. Such a nickname, Sawamoron. But yeah, the idea that it's not just between Furuya and Sawamura to become the ace, that Nori Kawakami could become the ace. I don't see it. Because Kawakami's always been the cleanup. He's always been the closing pitcher. He's never been the one to lead off the game, right? So I don't foresee Kawakami becoming the ace, but the fact that some of the teams support him becoming the ace is really cool. That they believe in Nori. That Zono's like, no, Nori can do it. I really like that. And I also like the tie back. The whole thing with Miyuki's character established in these first 2 episodes is the idea that Miyuki likes a challenge. The bigger the challenge, the better. He's like, yeah, the bigger the goal, the better. So the fact that May and their team has gone to nationals, Miyuki's not afraid of it. He's like, no, I want that challenge. I want to face them. And I kind of talked about this. We'll talk about Inashiro again in episode 66. But the idea, I kind of wanted Inashiro to win nationals at first, because then they'd be the reigning champs, and it would be like the biggest goal you can attain is defeating the reigning champions, right? I kind of wanted that to begin with, because that would be like such the underdog story. But then again, the fact that Inashiro didn't win nationals sets them up that if they face Sato again, it's still going to be anybody's game, and they're going to have that drive again, right? Because if they'd won nationals, it would have been the sort of thing where if they'd won nationals and they faced Sato and they lost, they could have said, well, we won nationals the prior year, so I guess we'll let you have this win, right? At the end of it. I don't think they'd give up during the game, but I think if Inashiro had won nationals during this year and faced Sato next year again for the finals and they lost, there wouldn't be as much at stake, I guess, because they would have already won nationals before. So they're like, well, we've already been at the very top and seen the scene from the top, so what else? We're going to do it a second time, you know? But the fact that they lost is going to make it, again, really hard if they face them again, because Carlos and May and Shirakawa and them are going to want to win and go back to nationals and get to the top again. They're going to want to do it. So they're going to want to beat Sato and if we set this up as a rematch, they're going to have that drive, right? It's sort of one of the things where I was thinking about, and again, we'll talk about it. I'm going to wait. We'll talk about it when we get to the episode. But I kind of, in hindsight, am glad that Inashiro didn't win. And we'll talk more about that when we get back to it. But yeah, so 59 first and second years. That's a crazy roster to choose from. 59 first and second years to make the top 20, right? So that's pretty cool. So that is, the odds are still with them, because that's only like half the team not being able to play. So that's cool. But yeah, Yuki recommending Miyuki as captain, having the most presence. And I like that there's this discussion between Jun and Rio and Yuki, because Jun and Rio didn't seem on board with Miyuki becoming captain, especially Jun. Jun was like, I don't think he can handle it. That's a lot of pressure. But Yuki recommended him. And it all connected. Oh my God, it connected. And I'm going to kind of talk about this in episode 65, but it all ended up connecting why Yuki recommended him. But yeah, so before we got to that, we had Kataoka calling Zono and Kuramochi in to talk about Miyuki becoming captain. And Kataoka asking for their advice. Because when I picture the top 5 second years, I would say that it's definitely Miyuki, Kuramochi, Zono, Kawakami, and then Shirasu are probably the top 5 second years. And so I love that he called in. I'm assuming Kuramochi and Zono were in line to be picked as captain too. But they ended up going with Miyuki, and it seems like that's what Kataoka's wanted to do for a while. And he's like, do y'all support it? And Kuramochi's pretty supportive right off the bat. He's like, yeah, I'm going to support him. He's not perfect, and I wish it had been me, but I'll support him because he picked up the pieces right after the loss. He's like, I couldn't accept the loss. Kuramochi's like, I had weakness, and I was doubting everything, and Miyuki instantly wanted to move forward. So, yeah, he's the right person for the job. And I like that Zono admits, like, yeah, he's the right person for the job, but here's the thing. Miyuki, they point out his flaws. He's like, I have reservations. He's not good at communicating, as we saw from when he was asked to say a few words, and Miyuki's like, I don't know what to say. He's like, but he also doesn't know how the others feel like. Zono worries about Miyuki's ability to relate to those that aren't as good as him. And we see that with Kawakami in episode 65. And the third years point that out to Miyuki, and we'll talk about that. But I like that eventually Miyuki, he struggles to find the words at first, and his communication isn't the best, so he's going to have to work on that. But he finally says, I want to be greedy about winning. And I've said since the start of the series, there's always been like a similarity between Miyuki and Furuya. They've had kind of a common ground, and they're both greedy, right? Furuya is greedy on the mound. He wants to be there. He's trying his hardest to build up his stamina because he wants to be the ace and he wants to stay on the mound. And Miyuki wants to be greedy about winning. He's like, I have big goals. I want us to win. I want us to be greedy and aggressive. And it's like, that's kind of cool. And then we get We have Kariba and Ono, which are established as two other second years. Kariba and Ono, or their first years, they're catchers. I like that we have Kariba and Ono. Cool. They're either first or second year catchers. I like that we're in on that. But Kataoka resigning. I hate that. I hate it so much. I'm like, dude, I feel like it's such a cop-out. I'm like, Kataoka, you can't just resign. I feel like Kataoka was so tied to the third years that they were his team. He followed these guys from the very beginning. And with them leaving, he feels like he's failed them. And he said that to them. He's like, it's part of your loss is my failure as a coach. And it's like, but then Raid brings it back later. She's like, the reason that Inashiro lost nationals was because of a 4-pitcher relay. The same strategy Kataoka had. So she's like, it's not a bad strategy. She's like, we just have to have the best pitchers. And the team that won nationals had the better 4 pitchers. And I'm sure that the team that won nationals, was it Karadai or I almost thought it was Kamamedai, but was it? And then I wondered if it was Kakadai, the team that the Ochai is from. They won nationals. And I'm sure that they watched the qualifier finals and saw what Sato did and pushed Inashiro to the brink. And because it didn't seem like Inashiro struggled through nationals. It just seemed like they just boom, boom, boom went through it. I was like, Sato gave him the biggest trouble, it looked like. And so the strategy isn't bad. You just got to perfect it. And I think that's what Ray was trying to tell Kataoka at the end. She's like, you just got to perfect the strategy. Like, we can do this. Don't leave. I'm hoping that the outsider coach, the Ochai, that they convince Kataoka to stay. If they even were co-coaches, they could even be assistant coach and coach. If they stayed on, I want Kataoka to stay. I want him to stay. I passed the fall tournament. I hate that. I want it to be like a Coach Ukai thing where they do really well at the fall tournament and he gets inspired. They can have a chance to go to spring nationals again and he gets inspired and I want him to stay on because of it. And even if they're co-coaching, I want that. And I think it's good that they have the assistant coach because there's a new perspective there that Kataoka's so stubborn and fierce in his ways that I think it might be good to have an outside perspective to kind of refresh his ideas. But I want Kataoka to stay. I don't want him to leave. That's so sad. That like threw me for a loop because I said in the reaction, I thought he was just going to talk to Sommer and the others about which person was going to be the ace, but then they throw that letter of resignation on and it's like, why? Why? Right? So awful. But okay, hashtag keep Kataoka. Hashtag keep Kataoka in this. I don't want him to leave. No, I want our sexy coach to stay on because oh man. So, yeah, then we go back to the third years in episode 65, which is in the sun, talking about them all practicing in the sun, and that's when we got our first introduction to the outsider, really. But the idea that they weren't on board with Miyuki, but then Yuki, my man, Yuki, captain of captains, oh, captain, my captain, bringing up that he wants Miyuki to get on the same level as Harada. That was so badass, and I love that moment. And it's so true that, yeah, Harada from Inashiro, he was catcher, cleanup, and captain, triple C's. And Yuki is like, I have so much respect for Harada, and I saw what that does to a team. Like, having somebody that can do the trifecta like Harada does affects so much, because even though Mei got the spotlight as the Tokyo Prince, Harada was the backbone of that team. Like, Harada was keeping it all together, even Mei. So the idea that Yuki's like, nah, we need someone like Harada. This team needs a Harada, and Miyuki has the best chance of becoming that. And it's going to take a long time and a lot of work, and it may be the end of next year as third years before Miyuki's at that level, but it needs to happen. And so I love that Yuki said that. That was so awesome. And that he's like, Miyuki has to accept the challenge. He's got to meet up. And that goes hand in hand with Miyuki's personality, that he wants a challenge and he does better when he is challenged. And so I like that. The bigger the challenge, the better. I'm so on board with that. But yeah, so 49 schools at nationals out of 4,059 high schools. Holy shit, I didn't realize that it was that big. That there were that many teams vying for nationals. And y'all have told me in the comments, y'all have told me how insane baseball is in Japan and how big of a deal it is, especially high school baseball, that it's almost more of a big deal. It's kind of like in the US, in America, college basketball is almost bigger than than national, than the NBA. It's like more people, I think, watch the Sweet 16 in the college basketball tournaments than they do the nationals for NBA, right? It's kind of insane how that works, but it's just a thing. And so I feel like with Japan, it's like that with high school baseball. But 4,059 teams narrowed down to 49, narrowed down to 1, and Inashiro got number 2. Damn, that's crazy. That's crazy. But so we have all of everybody working, and Furuya is thinking about, I like that Furuya is starting to think about strategy. Miyuki makes that note that Furuya is thinking about his strategy, and Furuya is building up that stamina. He could do 7 innings instead of 5, like he did 5 during the Inashiro game, and then he's working up to 7 now, and then it went back to 6. But yeah, but just the idea that Furuya is trying to work on that stamina. And then Nori, I feel so bad for Kawakami, for Nori, because you can tell that this loss really affected him. And I gave him a hard time because I don't think he's as good of a pitcher as Sawamura and Furuya. Because Furuya and Sawamura, even though they're not as controlled as Nori, they've got like a year less experience. I think that by the end of it all, obviously I think Furuya and Sawamura are going to end up being better pitchers than Kawakami. But I feel bad for Kawakami because he's just so down on himself. And kudos to the third year catcher. That guy, I always forget his name and I feel bad. But kudos to him for calling Miyuki out and being like, you're the captain now. Because Miyuki was just going to let him go. I was just like, oh, let him have his own space. And that's what works for Miyuki. Miyuki doesn't like talking to people. He doesn't like communicating. So it's hilarious that he's the captain now, and he's going to have to start doing that because it's outside his comfort zone. And so Miyuki's like, well, if I'm flustered, I just need to be by myself, and I'll pick myself up and pick up the pieces and move forward. Like he was doing watching the game after they lost. Miyuki went back to the cafeteria and started watching the game over again, and that's when Kuramochi found him. So that works for Miyuki. But like the third-year catcher points out, yeah, you're strong. Not everybody is as strong as you are in the way that you are. So your strategy isn't going to work for the rest of your team. You've got to talk to them. And Miyuki's like, I have to talk to them? And it's like, oh, no shit, Sherlock, that's the whole point. So I'm glad they called him out on it. And they're like, yeah, you've got to do something. You're the captain now. You got to do something. And they've established that Kuramochi and Zono are there to support him and help him out, kind of like Tamba and Jun helped Yuki. But at the end of the day, it's gonna be Miyuki that's got to make the calls, right? So interesting. But yeah, I love the juxtaposition of Inashiro like breezing through nationals, juxtaposed with Sato and their scrimmages and struggling. I like the duality of that, showing the team on top and then the other team struggling past their loss. I like it. And so the Prince from Tokyo, and that up until quarterfinals, May had gone 22 innings without a single run. And I love that he's like become an overnight celebrity. And for a second there, it seemed like Miyuki was a little jealous of May. He's like, because in that interview after Sato lost, May was very cocky in his interview. But now that they're at nationals, I'm sure that the coach and the teammates are like, don't be a cocky asshole, May. You're in front of national television. And he's like, oh, everything's great, Harada. And you can tell Harada's fed up with it because Harada knows it's fake and Miyuki knows it's fake. So Miyuki was kind of like, why is he acting? Like kind of frustrated with him. But Raichi, I'm so glad we get to see Raichi this season. I'm so glad we get to go back with Raichi. I have missed my Yasuki boys. I have missed my Yakushi boys. I have missed them. And so Todoroki and Raichi versus May. I said it way back earlier this season. I was like, I want to see Raichi versus May in this fall tournament so bad. I want to see it so bad. I want to see Raichi hit May's ball so bad. But yeah, I love that the dad's like, he's going to make some money. I love that. At the end of the day, what I love about Todoroki, the Todoroki father-son duo, what I love about them is at the end of the day, they're not in it for the glory of the win. They're not in it for the national title. Nah, Coach Todoroki's like, whatever. Like, national titles, whatever. I want my son to get rich. I want him to not be poor. So he's like, do what you gotta do, Raichi, to make that money. Take on that Tokyo Prince so that you can bat him out and then become famous. I love it. I love it. And I just love that Ray's just like, Narumiya. I'm like, I can't wait it. I can't wait. I want to see it. I want to see it. And so we also get in this episode, in episode 65, we get the idea of Miyuki and Sawamura's beliefs being a little bit different post-game. Like in episode 63, Miyuki, and you could argue that it's right after the loss that Miyuki is like kind of down and out about it, but Miyuki was like, we're not good enough. And I guess it's not opposing views, but Miyuki's like, we're not good enough. Our teammates were great, but we weren't good enough. Miyuki says we weren't good enough as a whole. Like the sum of our parts was not as good as the sum of Inashiro's parts. That's what he's saying. He's like, our third years were great, but we weren't good enough to help back them up. That's what Miyuki was saying. And Sawamura is kind of, at the time, I thought Sawamura was saying the opposite, but he's really not. Sawamura was kind of backing Miyuki up. He's like, no, you guys were amazing. He's like, we didn't lose because of you. We lost because of me. And Sawamura kind of takes blame for it. And I could feel that Kawakami in these episodes, Kawakami not only felt bad because of what he did, but also because he wasn't owning up to that responsibility like Sawamura was. And he wasn't moving forward and being as motivated as Furuya was. So Kawakami just felt like he was inferior to his underclassmen in that moment and not living up to being the second year that he's supposed to be. So that's really interesting. But yeah, Inashiro making the finals, Sawamura and Jun's talk. I love that. Like, when he's like, what does it mean to go to nationals? And then Jun says, I don't know, I've never been. But at the end of the day, it's like the mindset of now nationals is what you're going to make it. And I like that Jun's like, you need to go there so you can figure it out. Right? I love that. I absolutely love that. It ties back to characters in, I thought of Oikawa and Hinata from Haikyuu, but I can't talk about it because it's spoilers for the manga, so I'm not going to talk about it because those of you watching are probably maybe anime only with Haikyuu, so I won't talk about it, but it reminded me of Oikawa and Haikyuu and Hinata and Haikyuu to an extent, the Jun and Sawamura conversation about nationals, which we'll get to that later. But yeah, maybe when Haikyuu gets to that point, I'll bring it up and relate back to Ace of the Diamond. But yeah, so episode 66. So we go through Inashiro and getting to that point of Harada and May thanking the third years. That reminded me of Alba Josai very, very much. And it was kind of a weird contrast that May thanking the third years. In hindsight, that should have been a sign that they were going to lose. In hindsight, when a show does something like that, it's like when they start thanking the third years before the game, it's like that should have been a sign that they weren't going to win. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was like, oh, they'll win. And then it's kind of interesting because May's been to nationals and they made it to the last game, to the finals, and they just didn't make it. And I was going to relate back to Alba Josai because in Haikyuu, in season 1 of Haikyuu, Karasuno loses to Alba Josai at the end of the game, at the end of the tournament. And then Alba Josai goes on to face Shiratorizawa, and they lose. So they don't get to go to nationals either. So in the second season, what's interesting is that when they come back, it's two teams that still have a hunger to go to nationals, still hungry for that title and that chance, facing each other. And it makes the game so much more dynamic and so much more engaging because you have two teams that have a lot at stake, right? And so at the beginning of the episode, I was like, oh, I want Inashiro to win nationals so that they can be the ultimate team for Sato to take down. But in hindsight, I'm glad they lost because, one, if Sato beat Inashiro, went to nationals next season, and then ended up getting beaten at nationals, it's kind of like, well, you beat the national champion team, so did you really lose? You know, in one of those deals, right? Whereas because Inashiro didn't win nationals, they're still going to have, May and the others and Carlos and the others are going to have that hunger as third years to go back and try one more time to win nationals. They're going to have that hunger still. So they're going to have just as much at stake as Sato will be to try to get to that nationals spot, right? So I'm actually glad they got second in hindsight because it's going to make, if we have a Sato Inashiro rematch in the future, it's going to make it that much better. Because it's going to be like, it's going to truly be a rematch with both teams still having a lot at stake. So that's really cool. I like that. But yeah, Inashiro versus the team, and then Raichi, his dad, Coach Todoroki, wanting them to face the fall tournament. I'm so excited that Yakushi's going to be facing Sato again. We're going to have a rematch. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. It's just the idea of the view from the top, and that Inashiro wants that view from the top. Yeah. Yep. So I thought it was cool so we've seen Yuki and Rio and Jun and Masako hanging out together, but Tamba seems like he's moved on the most. Which Tamba wanted to hang out with his childhood friend, so what better time than right now? And I like that neither of them really watched the final. They both ended up just going to the beach with the other second year and third years, or I guess they were all third years, and just hanging out at the beach. And I like that Tamba and his friend come to the conclusion that they're not happy with where they're at, and they don't want their baseball career to just end now. Like I can't remember if it was Tamba or his friend that said they only did one tryout so far for college, and that they were going to take the exam. I think the friend said that, but I don't know. So yeah, the 4-pitcher relay that Coach Nita said that he used against Inashiro in one national. So Ray saying, your strategy worked. We just didn't have this. We had 2 first-year pitchers, a second-year pitcher, and a third-year pitcher. So your strategy isn't a mistake. It's a winning strategy. We just need the pitchers that have the experience and the talent to make it work. And so she's probably thinking by next year, Kawakami will be a third year. We'll have 2 second-year pitchers. And if old Tojo could step up and be our 4th pitcher, then that would be really cool. And we could possibly have a 4-pitcher relay again. That would be awesome. I feel like they're saying Tojo up to possibly be a pitcher to help out with them. And I think that maybe Ochiai is thinking that too. We'll have to see. But I like the idea that we went from Tamba and his friend having regrets to the idea of Ray trying to convince Kataoka that there shouldn't be a regret that he did the pitcher relay, because it clearly can work. They just need to perfect it. And then we went to Miyuki manipulating Nori, him finally communicating with Kawakami and getting him to practice pitching with the first years, because he's like, I know you have good control, so I can trust you to practice like you should with the first and second years. I can't trust Sawamura and Furuya to have that control. So he's debating old Nori, but he's trying to manipulate him a little bit, as only Miyuki knows how, because he's a troll. So at least he's communicating with him and getting Nori to maybe feel better about himself. And Ray points that out too. But yeah, so then we have kind of 2 outsiders. We have Tojo and our little outfielders, Seki and Aso, they look adorable, like our adorable Cinnabon duo. But I like Tojo. Tojo kind of looks like Jun. He looks like Jun. His personality is total opposite of Jun, but he looks like Jun. But the idea that he's here's the thing. This is the curious thing. I mentioned Jun. It's curious that I mentioned that because Tojo looks similar to Jun, but he's the opposite. Jun was a player who started out as a pitcher and then kind of was told he wasn't the best at pitching, so he realized he was better at batting. Tojo seems like a pitcher that thinks he's not as good of a pitcher as he is, so he wants to bat because he doesn't think he can live up to the standard that Furuya and Sawamura and Kawakami are setting. But others are commenting that he's actually a pretty good pitcher and he has a good arm. So it would be cool if Tojo ends up becoming the opposite of Jun, that he becomes and gets to play as a pitcher and realize his full potential, whereas Jun realized his full potential wasn't in what he wanted to do, but was in batting instead. That could be really cool. That could actually be really interesting. I kind of want Tojo to become the 4th pitcher and to kind of join the others, because he's a first year just like Sour. We could have 2 second-year pitchers and a third-year pitcher next year. That would be actually pretty cool. That would be a good strategy, a good team. But yeah, so this Ochiai, this outsider, was from Kokadai, a team that's been to nationals, and he's been vying for that coach's spot for 2 years. Interesting. And now that Kataoka's put in his letter of resignation, they instantly latched on and offered him the job to be an assistant coach, like an interim coach. And I'm just waiting for it to come out to the team that Kataoka's put in his letter of resignation. Like, that's going to be such a blow to that team. I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you wait until the whole year was over? Still mad about that. But this Ochiai seems very interesting. He's totally different than Kataoka. He questions why he's pushing them so hard and just seemingly running them ragged. I'm curious to know what his strategy is, like how he's different than Kataoka. I think that'll be really interesting to see what he does differently than him. That will be very interesting. And I don't know. They've got Chiba and Arita. They're facing 2 scrimmages of Chiba and Arita next, and then Yakushi. So I don't know if we're going to just montage past Chiba and Arita and then go straight to Yakushi, or what we're going to do in the next set of episodes. But this is setting up so many different things. So many different things. And yeah, and then we've got a fall tournament to worry about, which I'm wondering, I don't think we're going to get to the fall tournament yet this season. I think we're going to start season 2 with the fall tournament. But we're gonna round out our scrimmages and September with, because it said the tournament started in October. The fall tournament started in October, so it's August right now. It's the end of August. Nationals are just getting over, so we've got these scrimmage games left. I have a feeling that the rest of the season is going to cover the end of August and September, and then season 2 is going to be in October. Yeah. I don't know. I was really surprised by this season and just how much we got in it and just what it's setting up and all of the different elements that are kind of like all the pieces moving in different ways on the board. It's so cool. But yeah, I keep thinking this show can't get any better, and then it does. Like, I love this set of episodes. Every set of episodes I've watched so far in the season, they get better and better, and I love them just as much. That's the testament of how consistently good this show is. So yeah, I can't wait to see Todoroki next set of episodes. I can't wait to see Raichi. I've missed my boy Raichi. I've missed Coach Todoroki. I've missed their banter. I've missed their ridiculousness. I've missed Sanada. I need him back in this too. We have Sanada that's voiced by Levi from Attack on Titan. You have Mei that's voiced by Eren from Attack on Titan. It's like, I need this. I'm so excited. And then Raichi is voiced by Akutagawa, so, you know, shares a voice actor with those characters. But yeah, I'm so curious to know what y'all thought of these episodes. There's so much going on. And then you have Haruichi and Ryo. You had their whole thing, their whole deal as brothers, dealing with the fact that they can't go to nationals together anymore. And what's Ryo going to do now? I thought this episode, with the exception of Tamba saying, maybe it was Tamba saying he was trying out for college, with the exception of Tamba, we didn't really get into what any of the third years are doing. And we haven't seen Chris. Chris Senpai wasn't around, so I guess Chris Senpai went home. But we haven't seen any of the others. So I really thought this episode we were going to get into what the third years are doing for college and everything, but we haven't got that yet. So I'm curious. Maybe we'll get that in the next set of episodes. Have to wait and see. But in any case, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. What did you guys think of these episodes? This was just craziness, and why should we expect any less? So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm so ready for us to see Yakushi again, but we'll see if that happens on the next set of episodes of Ace of the Diamond. Bye.